I was in the middle of a work trip when my phone buzzed on the hotel nightstand. Alert, motion detected. Living room. I opened the security app, assuming it was a technical error or a passing shadow. Instead, my parents filled the screen. They were inside my house, measuring the walls, shifting furniture, walking through the space like it already belonged to them. Then my mother laughed and said, "Once everything's moved in, she won't cause a fuss." My chest went tight. They weren't stopping by. They weren't helping. They were taking over my life while I was away. I didn't shout. I didn't confront them. I closed the app, sat still for a moment, and made a single choice, one that would change exactly what they came home to. No one saw it coming. My name is Amelia, and for most of my adult years, I've been the dependable one in my family. I built a solid career in a demanding profession, one that pays well enough for independence, travel, and eventually buying my own home in Seattle. I didn't inherit that life. I didn't lean on anyone to create it. I built it quietly, carefully, and mostly by myself. In my family, that made me useful. My parents often said they were proud of me, but their focus rarely stayed on me for long. It always drifted back to my younger brother. He was the dreamer, the risk taker, the one who just needed a little more time to figure things out. And somehow that extra time was always funded by someone else, usually me. At first, it didn't seem dangerous. A bill covered here. A payment helped with there. Every request was framed as temporary. Every favor was just this once. I told myself that supporting family was normal. I told myself generosity wasn't the same as weakness. Whenever I hesitated, my parents reminded me how fortunate I was, how stable my life had become, how much harder things were for him. So I stayed quiet. I softened my limits. I picked up calls late at night. I transferred money without pressing for explanations. I convinced myself that keeping everyone calm was the same thing as being valued. My house was the only place that felt completely mine. I bought it on my own in a peaceful neighborhood and shaped it into somewhere I could finally exhale. There was one room in particular that meant everything to me, a space I had invested time, care, and intention into. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't flashy, but it grounded me after exhausting weeks away. That's why watching my parents move through it like planners instead of guests felt surreal. Sitting alone in that hotel room, replaying the footage again and again, the truth began to settle. The ease in their movements, the confidence in my mother's voice, the complete absence of hesitation. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't help that crossed a line. This was a decision they made because I had spent years showing them I wouldn't resist. I didn't turn the camera off. I let it play again, this time with the sound turned up. I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. I needed to hear it clearly. They stood in my living room talking as if I didn't exist. My father gestured down the hallway, discussing what could be moved. My mother nodded, already rearranging my future in her mind. Their voices were calm, reasonable, the tone people use when they believe they're being fair. Then my mother said it again. Once everything was in place, I wouldn't make a scene. I would just accept it. There was no anger in her voice, no hesitation, no guilt, just certainty. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Harder than strangers touching my belongings. Harder than the idea of my brother moving into my home without permission. Because in that moment, I understood this wasn't desperation or impulse. It was habit. They weren't concerned about my feelings. They were relying on my history of silence. I rewound the clip and listened again, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. My mother laughed softly afterward, like she was sharing a private joke, like my compliance was something dependable, something they had learned to use. And the worst part was this. She was right about who I had been. I replayed every moment I had chosen not to react. Every time money I sent with trust behind it ended up funding something I never agreed to. Every plan that quietly included my time, my effort, my home, decisions made as if my consent was optional. I was always told it was simpler if I didn't resist. So I didn't. Somewhere along the way, I mistook patience for respect and generosity for affection. Sitting alone, it finally became clear what that misunderstanding had cost me. This wasn't about my brother needing support. It was about my parents treating my life like shared property. They believed my achievements gave them permission, that my space was theirs to rearrange, that my boundaries were flexible suggestions instead of fixed lines. What hurt most was their certainty that I wouldn't object. That's when something changed inside me. It wasn't fear or sadness. It was sharper than that. Cool, deliberate. For years, I had tried to be agreeable, understanding, the daughter who reduced friction for everyone else. And all it earned me was being the contingency plan no one bothered to ask. I let the anger settle. Not wild or dramatic, but precise. The kind that thinks before it moves. They assumed silence meant acceptance because it always had. They believed I'd comply because history said I would. That assumption was the crack they didn't see coming. I didn't call. I didn't confront. That alone shocked me. The old version of me would have rushed to explain, argue, plead for delay. But something had shifted in that hotel room. I understood then that confrontation wouldn't stop them. It would only teach them how to be sneakier. So I stayed quiet and started preparing. On the flight home, I paid for Wi-Fi and opened my laptop. I made a folder with a plain name. Inside, I began collecting proof, old transactions, recurring payments, transfers that were always labeled temporary, emergencies that never seemed to end. One record alone looked innocent. Two looked manageable. Together, they told a story of expectations stretched across years. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't kindness anymore. It was entitlement, something I had unintentionally trained. I also knew my brother well enough to predict one thing. He never did anything privately. If he planned to move into my house, he would want witnesses, applause, proof that he had arrived. Timing mattered. So I watched. His posts, his hints, his countdown energy. He wanted attention. I decided not to interrupt it. While they rearranged my home, I built something they couldn't dismiss. I didn't exaggerate or dramatize. I just organized facts. For the first time, I wasn't cushioning anyone's emotions. I was defending my limits. By the time the plane landed, the anger was gone. In its place was something steady. A plan rooted in clarity, not revenge. They thought silence was permission. They were right about one thing. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to let them face consequences. I didn't pull into my driveway. I parked down the street and walked, watching my house like it belonged to someone else. Cars lined the road. Strangers moved freely through my front door. Music shook the walls of the quiet space I had built without asking me. I paused, let it hit, the invasion, the disbelief, the rage. Then I walked in. The living room was unrecognizable. Furniture shoved aside. Lights mounted. A backdrop covering my wall. People I'd never met lounged comfortably, laughing, drinking, acting like this was normal, like it was deserved. My mother stood at the center, energized, commanding the room in a way I rarely saw directed toward me. When she noticed me, she stiffened. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "I thought you were away." "I came home," I said evenly. "To my house." She exhaled, irritated. "We're in the middle of something important. Don't turn this into an issue." That sentence told me everything. My brother stood nearby, phone raised, smiling for an audience that only existed to validate him. He was mid-performance. When he saw me, the smile faltered, but he kept going. "Guys," he laughed into the camera, "look who showed up. My sister, Amelia. She's fine with all this." I stepped fully into view. "No," I said calmly. "I'm not." The room shifted. Conversation stalled. A few people exchanged looks. My brother's grin hardened. "Relax." And that's where his confidence began to crack. He muttered under his breath, "You're ruining the mood." "I'm done," I said, my voice steady. I didn't raise it. I didn't argue. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had prepared. No theatrics were needed. Not for anyone in this room. "This is my home," I stated firmly, scanning the faces around me. "I own it. No one asked for my permission to be here today." My brother scoffed. "You don't need to make a scene in front of everyone." "I do," I replied, turning to him directly, "because this was performed in front of everyone. You don't live here. You were never invited to move in. And the life you're showing off, the success you claim, It was built on years of my support you never repaid. My father stepped forward, concern written across his face. This is a family matter. You're embarrassing us. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm stopping it. I placed the folder on the nearest table. These are records, payments, bills, support I provided over the years under the assumption it was temporary. It wasn't. My brother tried to laugh it off, but his eyes kept flicking to the folder. This is insane, my mother interjected sharply. After everything we've done. You've been in my home without asking, I said, my tone measured. Measuring walls, moving my things, deciding my life while I was away. Her mouth opened and closed wordlessly. I turned back to my brother. You wanted people to see the truth? Here it is. He took a step forward. Turn that off, he hissed toward the phone. You're taking this too far. I'm not the one who made this public, I replied. You did. At that moment, someone entered the room. She didn't shout. She didn't look angry. She simply looked resolute. In her hands was an envelope. I think this belongs here, she said, stepping forward. My brother paled. Why are you here? She ignored him, focusing on me. You should see this. She opened the envelope, pulling out neatly organized documents. This is a contract connected to a vehicle you claimed was yours, she explained, showing the papers to my parents. The name responsible? Not yours. Amelia's. Silence fell over the room. I took the papers from her hands. The signature alone told the story. You used my name, I said softly. Without asking. My brother's panic was immediate. It was only temporary. I was going to fix it. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask, I corrected. You assumed. She wasn't done. There's more, she added, looking at my parents. Accounts were opened in your names, bills accrued without your knowledge. It's already impacting you. My father's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then looked back at my brother as if seeing him anew. You did this, he whispered. My brother stepped back, shaking his head. I was going to make it right, but the moment had already shattered everything. Not my words, not my actions, just the unmasking of the truth. I drew a deep breath. This ends now. Anyone who doesn't live here must leave. My mother rushed toward me. You can't do this. We're family. You stopped treating me like family the day you assumed I'd accept this, I said calmly. She grabbed my arm. You're destroying us. I gently freed myself. No, I'm stopping this from destroying me. I took out my phone. I'm asking everyone to leave. If not, I'll handle it properly. People began to move quietly, leaving quickly. The tension drained from the room. My brother froze, staring at the floor. This didn't have to happen, he muttered. It did, I replied, because it already happened without me. By the time the house emptied, the silence felt almost surreal. Lights still glowed. The backdrop remained, but the illusion was gone. I glanced at my parents one last time. You raised me to be reasonable, I said. You taught me to keep the peace. Today, I chose myself instead. For the first time, the house truly felt like mine. Not empty, but quiet in a way I had never known. No intrusive voices, no steps that didn't belong to me, no tension waiting for the next demand. When my parents reached out later, it wasn't to apologize. It was to justify, to explain why I had gone too far, why matters should have remained private. But nothing about what they did was private to me. My brother vanished almost immediately. The confidence, the noise, the performance, all disappeared. Without access or audience, nothing propped him up. The image he built crumbled. As for my parents, the consequences they assumed I would absorb silently were now theirs to face. For the first time, I didn't soften the impact, and I didn't feel guilty. I moved through my home, room by room, rearranging, cleaning, reclaiming spaces that had been treated as if they didn't belong to me. Physically, nothing had changed, but everything had changed where it mattered. I had stopped negotiating my worth, and for the first time, the quiet felt like peace. For years, I believed family meant enduring, that silence and patience would eventually improve things. I was wrong. Family isn't entitlement or assumed compliance. It's respect. Walking away wasn't cruelty. It was survival. My home is calm now, and so am I.